You don't have to be successful at funding applications to be an artist. You don't even have to apply. I mean, it's not compulsory. But I think it's important that funding is available and that the government actually invests in artists and the creative industry. And I think Tasmania has got it's the highest percentage of artists per population. So we're already a very creative place. And I think it helps. Funding can help all of us access art that we may not necessarily encounter in our day-to-day kind of life. And funding also allows for arts to be funded that may not be necessarily commercially viable or even, I mean, I suppose it's that side of things that I think it's important. But there's a few things that for me came out of that, which is around time. And that often the funding can give you some money to move away from your day job for a period of time, or give you some space to pay the bills while you focus on that part of your practice. And it's something that Matt Warren says is around artists will create art anyway. You don't need funding to create art. But he talks about that it actually is a benefit for all of us culturally if we can see some of this output in product. So, sometimes putting on an exhibition or a theatre production or a dance piece costs money, and, it's not something everybody can afford to just do for themselves. So I suppose funding from a government point of view helps support that. And it actually, in many ways, it goes into the economy because it employs people. So it's that sort of cycle, I suppose. And I suppose the other thing I was thinking of is also, the government funds elite athletes. So I don't really see the difference between funding elite athletes and funding, creative excellence. Yeah, so it's important, from my perspective, I think funding is an important thing, but it's certainly not being an artist or creating anything. So I asked the girls who do funding to give me some notes, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I did want to kind of point out that there are other funding bodies besides Arts Tasmania. There's obviously Tas Regional Arts, which is based in Launceston, which manages the Ministry for the Arts, which is a federal body. They manage the Regional Arts Fund, so they're a really great resource to contact if you've got projects in mind. Obviously, the Australia Council is the national funding body. And they have a range of programs also. NAVA, which is the National Association for Visual Arts, if you're a visual artist and you have a membership there, you can apply for a lot of grants and fellowships through them. But there's also a lot of philanthropic organisations, like the Sydney Maya Fund, the blah, 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 blah. So, or the Tas Community Fund also, that provides support for art and cultural pursuits. So I don't want to bang on too much, but there's actually a section on the Arts Tasmania website called Resources, and if you look under that, there's a tab called, I think it's Financial Support. There's a list of funding organisations, which you can kind of have a look at. So I suppose every funding organisation has different guidelines. It's really important just to run through them and have a look. Arts Tasmania program officers are always happy to talk to you about your ideas, even if they're not very well formed, or the projects that you're thinking about. We've also got Wendy Morrow, who I don't know if you've met before. Wendy's a fantastic human being in general. She's a dancer. She's actually got a show on at the moment at the Young Conformity, but she's also a professional development officer. So she's got a wealth of knowledge. So if you want to have a chat to someone just about your practice or where you're at, and where you are or what you feel like, just pick up the phone and call someone. It doesn't, no one's going to hold you to what you say, but it's just a really good resource to talk about what options are out there, or different people you might want to talk to and connect with, because I suppose those guys talk to a whole bunch of people all the time. They're just a really great resource to kind of talk to about, have you spoken to Rita or this manager, or whatever it is, whatever is relevant to you. And they can also point you in the direction. If you've got legal problems or you need some advice, they can, suggest maybe Arts Law Centre of Australia or whatever. They're really good at redirecting you to other people. And the other thing I was just going to mention is the peer assessment. applications that come to an Arts Tasmania funding round, they're not actually assessed by us as bureaucrats. They're actually assessed at arm's length through a peer assessment process. So you can actually also nominate yourselves to be on the peer panels. So you might get called up to assess, a number of applications for a particular program. We obviously don't assess programs if you've got an application or if there's any conflict of interest. But it means that people who have got a knowledge in one particular area are the ones that are looking at those applications. So if there's a bunch of music applications, the peers will be peers that have a music background, for example. And then they then make recommendations to the Arts Advisory Board around assessment. So it is all done, and if you want more information, it's all on the website. But if you do want to be a peer, we've just got a role in you can put your name down in. It doesn't mean you will absolutely get picked, but if they'll look at who they've got in the applications and then who they've got on the register and try and match them up. So it's a good thing to do, and it's a good experience actually, because then you get to see other people's assessment applications. It gives you a good idea of how things stand out in one versus the other. Is that enough to start with?
I think you've been very comprehensive, and the others can go to quite different topics.
Yeah.
So I think that was a very good summary. There was just one thing that I'll add. It's not for funding for a grant. You can get a loan as well.
Oh, yes.
From Arts Tasmania. So for example, you want a piece of equipment that can help you produce your artwork or your craft or design work a bit better. A piece of equipment might help you a lot. So you can get a government grant for that.
At a low interest rate.
Yes. And it's a really interesting topic. Some people don't want to look at arts funding because it's too hard. Some people don't want to do it because they couldn't, because they couldn't be bothered, and I think that's a mistake. So before I invite Karina to speak, I can tell you that I have been an artist applying for a grant for myself as an individual artist. I've been a CEO of a couple of arts organisations applying for annual grants. I've been a government Arts Tasmania officer looking at public art and visual arts and design applications. I've been on 3 panels of Arts Tasmania making funding decisions. I've been on an Australia Council funding panel as well, and I've also been a peer assessor. And it's very complex. So I think that Edwina's advice on becoming a peer is really, really good, because you find out what is current, and you find out what people are looking for, how an application is written, and what grabs the attention of the assessment group. So that's something worth looking at. If you don't get selected to be a peer, you can try again. But they obviously wouldn't select you if your experience wasn't sufficiently deep. But sometimes they need people because of the distribution of stuff that they want, like more women or more people in regional communities or more people with technical knowledge and so on and so on. So it's worth looking at. I'm sorry I've kept your adoring public away from you too, just for an extra 5 minutes, but you can let rip now, Karina.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Funding. That shifting balance of power is funding around our creative minds was the topic, and Greg's broken that down into a whole range of different areas, and I think Edwina's covered many of those aspects very, very well for us. I'm wearing 2 hats today, both as a designer maker and as a CEO of a not-for-profit organisation, Design Tasmania. So funding is an interesting. I'm kind of grappling with it in a new context. So previously, I would apply for funding through the university for different types of research projects, and that had a range of different sort of criteria to what you would apply to the Australia Council or Arts Tasmania for a project. I think that the framework of funding and applying for a grant through major government bodies is changing. So as the landscape's changing and the criteria is changing. So you need to kind of be aware and a little bit up to date with the requirements of what the language is and what they're asking for. So I've got on my notes that applying for a grant and receiving a grant is another form of exchange. They'll give you money to create or make something, but they'll want something back in return. So you need to be very careful that you can articulate, A, what it is that you are wanting to make or produce, and what you believe the outcomes of making that will be. If you are able to clearly articulate that, you're halfway there to being successful with a grant or a fund. If you find it really challenging to articulate what your ideas are about, how they're positioned within a social cultural framework or the society that we live in, how they are going to kind of make a difference, what's their impact. It's going to be very challenging for the people assessing your application to understand what you're on about. When I started as a, firstly I started as a designer, and I think I started in interior design, then I went into furniture design, and the idea of my practice and understanding what my practice was about has taken years to kind of get my head around and understand what is my practice about. And as a young person, or even at any stage in your career, the person talking about applying for a grant at an intersection, often that intersection is about a challenge that you have within how you are framing your practice, how you position yourself, and that you know, it's a challenge to write the grant, but if you're successful, it gives you time and that space to really explore what that might mean for you. I have chosen a different path on a personal level than relying on grants. I've never felt comfortable about grant writing. We were discussing this earlier. I think that a lot of artists and designers, there's such a personal attachment to the work that is created that you fear the critique that may be going on about your work, that you don't have much control over that, and it can be a bit disheartening when it's not when you're not successful. So I moved into academia, and that created time and space and income in a different way to enable me to have a practice that I didn't have to rely on applying for grants through the traditional means. But I see great benefit in the funding bodies that are available, and as the CEO of Design Tasmania, I'm very reliant on them. We wouldn't exist without them, and I'm very grateful that they're there, and look forward to being able to work more closely with Arts Tasmania to continue to assist you to sell your work and to promote your work as Tasmanian crafts design artisans. What else?
because you're each looking from quite a different angle,
Yeah.
so that's good.
Okay, well, I'm probably the worst person on this panel to talk about applying for grants because I've never having applied for one. But I tend to avoid seeking them, and I've got a few reasons why that is. I can see the value of them, especially for things like a theatre company or dance troupe or something like that, that, you know, where, let's face it, it's hard to make a living from just giving performances or whatever. Probably the main reason I don't like applying or don't like the idea of applying for grants is I dislike jumping through other people's hoops. I have enough of my own hoops that I need to jump through without jumping through someone else's. And, you know, I think this grant application hoop jumping has become an art form in itself. Look, this is really an outsider looking in. I don't really know, but it seems to me that it's probably very time consuming and you need to be good at that skill, and I don't think I am, I'm good at other things, and the time spent thinking about what you need to do to apply for a grant, I'd rather spend doing what I'm good at, which is engaging my brain and my hands and making things, which is what I love to do. There's actually a really good reason for this hoop jumping, and I can see that we're using public money for these grants. It's taxpayers' dollars, but that we need to be accountable for it. You can't just be dished out willy-nilly without some sort of what's the word? You know what I'm trying to say. I don't like the idea of being beholden or answerable or having to think about. I think if you have certain types of grants, you might be able to tell me if I'm right on this, but you have to do some sort of disbursement after you. Yeah.
It's generally not onerous.
It's not, it's usually, you just need to account for how you spend it.
Right, okay.
So that it matches up with how you
Yes.
said you were going to, and then provide some evidence that you actually did.
Yes.
There are lots of naughty artists who don't put their grants.
So you're
Then
fine.
they can't apply again.
That's
I
right.
find that all a bit.
It's not that scary.
Okay. You'll have to convince me. I think there's another problem. It's quite easy to become fairly attached to this grant funding team, especially for groups and things. And suddenly the government changes, or you know, the way of thinking about it changes, and suddenly that income stream dries up or evaporates a bit. So you, without as much money as you need, you have to put people off, or you know, I just see problems with it. Yeah. I mean, times get hard and the arts are sort of deemed a bit, unnecessary. And so arts funds were the first thing that gets cut, don't you think?
Education.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's very competitive, you know, and there's probably not really enough to go around. I mean, did you say 3 million for?
There's never enough to go.
No.
It's pretty small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Pretty small states.
Yeah. I
That's
think it
true.
might be more than that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I didn't look it up.
now my perception is that there's a little bit of a gravy train with arts funding. It seems to be the same people on the same merry-go-round, sort of having their turn. I might be wrong in that, but it's just a perception I have. And that probably the people who are very good at putting in applications and like know the right words and the right boxes to tick. That's a skill.
It is absolutely a skill.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily a skill that if you want to engage at that you can't do it.
Yeah.
If that's
Yes.
an area that
And not everybody
I'm
bad
too
at
old,
it.
I'm running out of time.
Writing grants do not get grants. I mean, people,
Yeah.
talent shines through with the worst
Yes.
grant writing skills will get a grant.
Yes.
It's often about the idea, and
Yes.
it's as much how you express the idea, but if the idea is extremely captivating to people, there is a bit of sort of,
Okay, yes.
you know, they go, wow, I just cannot believe how amazing that,
Yes.
that project idea is. It may not be articulate. I mean, obviously, if it's completely illegible, then you know it's harder to get.
Yes, but it's true. Some artists keep applying for grants, and they act as though they deserve it.
Yeah, that's what.
That's really off-putting. Like, I won't say the name of this artist, but when I was working at Arts Tasmania, this artist phoned me up and says, "Hi Greg," I knew him, and he said, "I'd like to have a grant." "Oh, that's great," I said to him. "Have you applied for it?" "Oh, do I have to apply for it?" So it was just really quite amazing that you do have people who think that they're so good that they deserve it and they shouldn't have to actually apply for a grant. And it's just, well, I think I accept everything you say, but there's also the other side.
Yes, I
you know,
realise that. I'm not coming from the point where I think it shouldn't be available to people. No, I've won a few competitions. I'm not against entering the odd competition.
That's different.
Yeah, and some of those prices are quite lucrative. Talk about quite a lot, but it's not something you can rely on.
No.
If you're relying on winning a $10,000 competition every year, just forget it. It's very subjective and fickle, and depends on who's judging it and a whole lot of things. But it can be quite good if you happen to win one or two. This all might sound a bit cynical, but it's just a reflection of who I am. I'm just too old to start jumping through hoops. Should have written these notes out a bit more legibly, shouldn't I? I'm fairly independent. I like doing my own thing. I like working alone. That's just me. And there's also, I get a sense of pride in being able to look after myself and live quite reasonably, I say luxuriously, from what I'm able to make with my own hands. That's a feeling of pride to me. Now I have a big thing here. Why are the arts funded? Now I've written because it's bloody hard to make a living. The field of work is not always highly valued. This is a bit of a bugbear of mine because an artist can spend as many years in a training institution learning their craft as a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. But at times just nowhere nearly as highly valued as one of those professions. And then one doesn't make more than an artist. The argument being that these people are so much more necessary than artists, that I would probably argue the opposite. Not the opposite, but I would argue that an artist is as important to the well-being of society as a doctor or a brain surgeon or whatever. Feeding the soul through the arts is just as important as feeding the body with foods. I mean, can you imagine what our lives would be like if there was no art in it? It'd just be grey, it'd be horrible. It wouldn't be worth living. So, that's where I'm coming from. There's this sort of perception that someone who's an artist, that's fine, it's a little hobby to do it on the side. While you do your real job, like teaching or curating or working in a coffee shop or garden or whatever, a whole heap of other things. There aren't too many of us that can actually make a proper living just making art.
I think you're one of the few very lucky ones as an arts practitioner who can actually make a living. Most, I would say, arts graduates end up having at least minimum of 3 years training and then ending up with no life in the arts afterwards. So my final question about this is that do all people who have apprenticeships in plumbing continue being plumbers? And do bad plumbers continue to exist and get jobs? similarly, one should ask the question of artists, how many artists who get trained and who graduate and continue to make work is my first question. Secondly, how many of them really should continue to make work? So it's I think a very big subject, very difficult to answer. And now
There seem to be a lot more people doing that kind of study now than there used to be when I was going to the 60s. Isn't it? So, you know, there's a whole lot more people wanting to bite at the same pie, or, you know, not very much larger pie, so...
well, as time's moving on,
Yes,
shall we open this up? Thank you to the gathering. I'll just start off by saying that in response to what Sue has said, I remember the last grant I got was from Arts Tasmania, and I was devising a karaoke cabaret, and it was a political one. It wasn't just because I wanted to sing karaoke. But I did all the translations, all the karaoke DVDs, and designed all the costumes, and even made some of them. But I needed someone to direct me, otherwise the cabaret wasn't going to be a good one. Someone to help me complete the script. So I applied for a grant to have Robert Jarman come and direct me. Now that's a really good use of a grant, and I got it. And without that grant, I wouldn't have been able to engage Robert Jarman. Without Robert Jarman, I wouldn't have had that direction that I badly needed. And without Robert, I couldn't have finished the scripts to any degree of satisfaction. So I think, you know, when it comes to that sort of circumstance, a grant is certainly valid. So I'll just show that story up, and does anybody else have a similar experience?
Well, I'd like to sort of back you up, so they come from the same moral issues. And for me, this question was at 1990. I left Australia and I pursued my career in America. And where they idolised the underdog. So I was like, I was making a lot of money.
What were you doing making a lot of money?
Two-dimensional works, oil paintings. And I just toured the country with the art shows.
Wow.
And the people just flock to you there. You don't have to find anybody. They come to you.
Yeah, well, when I talk later on much further ground about making a living selling art, I'll address some of that. I mean,
Yeah, I just found I couldn't, even though I lived in Western Australia at the time, and I was fairly successful. I had lots of solo exhibitions. I was doing okay. But when I went to America, because I was the underdog, and you're from Australia,
yeah, exotic.
and I didn't have to work hard for it. And I didn't believe in going for grants. Much the same reasons as you. And so that's where I ended up. I ended up going, because I came back 7 years ago. I burnt myself out.
Yeah.
I just clicked along.
Is their philosophy towards art different to here?
Much different. It is a acceptance of what they see is what they like, whether it's fashion or whether it's trendy or whatever, they will purchase. And they're very rarely what in my time, their things have changed since then. There's no, that's the price you want, fine, thank you.
Well, I think you must be very lucky and have just the right product that we wanted to need any development or...
Quite a few Aussies going over there at the time, and I know at that time there were a lot of Aussies leaving Western Australia because about 7 Australians producing what they wished or what they need.
Well, there's the next section, there's a couple of questions in the next section of this discussion which addresses that, how you decide what people want. So are there any other questions?
This question.
Is someone else?
No, it's you.
We're all pointing at you.
I've got a few. First of all, Susie, I like what you said, but then you know I'm offending you, so. I have a friend called Mark, and he was he had a plan, and as he worked in doing his job, he also was putting together the things that he needed, because his goal was to become a furniture maker. Now, he was very good at his job, but he actually had a sort of a long-term plan for what he wanted to do. And he set up a studio down at Margate, and built that himself, so all that sort of stuff. And he also did a bit of work at the university. This is where my obsessions will come out. And he ended up having enormous blues with the university, because he said the university does not teach its graduates to plan for their own future. I think he's absolutely right there. And it goes down to this idea that somehow or other the world is obliged to find funding for it. Now, that was a long time ago. I don't think there wouldn't be the same argument now, because lots of other people are now in a situation where you can't go to university and just expect to do a job. But he's done all right. And he's never complained about the fact that you don't earn big dollars. Okay? But I don't know whether the universities have changed. My personal view is probably hardly at all, but that's a personal view. So I was pleased about, because there is a thing about grants where they want you to be the sort of person that they want, as opposed to, from what I can see, accepting that you are what you are. I'd be far happier to see individuals being authorised to go around and find a place and find really interesting people. It's actually done in business. It's done in Sydney. But it's a different model. It's not this applying for grants model. Now, I don't know. So the question is anyone thinking outside the square, or are we all simply locked into applying for grants?
Of course.
We heard
Absolutely.
that people are not.
Sorry.
Not everybody, I mean, it's just...
No, I understand that, but the overall sort of culture.
I think the culture has changed to think more outside the square than I think that the amount of people applying for funding is smaller. I've spent 17 years in academia teaching design, and my graduates from UNSW Art and Design, most of them, I said, don't wait for somebody to give you a job, you go out there and you create it yourself. They're much more entrepreneurial, they're more skilled to run their own business, and many of them have and are very successful designers. And actually, I can't actually think of any that have sort of created their, they might have had art start, or, you know, like, what's the thing when you get the doll for 12 months?
Yeah.
And
The next
gen.
Yeah.
A couple of them would have done that. But life is very different now. It's so much more exciting than having to rely on the traditional funding bodies.
And the whole funding structure has changed anyway. You can't rely on it.
No.
I mean, you would have remembered that George Randers, when he was asked this,
Enough said.
More people selling on the internet now.
Yes, so that's something that in terms of the next part of the talk, that I
Yes, we'll
think
talk
in
about
terms of
that.
different
Yes.
opportunities of how you can get what you need to do to get your work out there.
All right, so the second question is about equity and inclusion in this stuff. So I look at a lot of the art stuff and say, well, do we know what the socioeconomic status and the geographical distribution and age of the people who are funded?
We do, well, I think from my time at Arts Tasmania, and we strive towards a sense of equal distribution.
Yeah, we don't actually ask people's age. So that's not an
Drop age off.
Yeah. We don't, so they're not assessed against whether someone's young.
No, that's all right.
But yeah, no, geographical, so what happens with the process is that they're assessed by peer assessors at a panel level. So peer assessors that are relevant to that particular practice group together. And then recommendations from that panel go to the Tasmanian Arts Advisory Board. So that's a board appointed by the Minister this current iteration time. It has been around for about 40 years. And then they look at the kind of overarching spread and say where are the grant applications from the northwest, or and have a look at that kind of geographical spread to ensure that there is at least some equity. And from last year they had a program where that was just exclusively funding for the Northern Exposure program, because they identified that there was a gap between the level of applications getting through from the north and the northwest, so there was a specific fund specifically for those.
So did that blinding realisation come out of an ongoing monitoring process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the issue is that the north and the northwest are a lot smaller population size.
They are the equal of the south when you add them together.
Yes, but look, I'm not going to get into.
No, it's all right.
Yes, absolutely. The Arts Tasmania is part of a kind of Commonwealth program that looks at statistics and funding and all of that sort of stuff. So there's absolutely programs of reporting where things are going, what organisations are getting funding, what's the gender balance. There's a whole lot of assessment.
Yes, and it's not a matter of suddenly realising that people in the north and northwest were getting fewer grants. When I worked at Arts Tasmania, that was in the early 90s, and already for many years they had been aware of the fact that there were very few applications of any quality coming up in the northwest in particular. So this has been a realisation for a very long time. And initiatives like Northern Exposure try to write this, and so it must be public perception that Arts Tasmania doesn't do anything about it. That's totally untrue.
Yeah, we try it. I mean, we've got an Aboriginal arts program. That's because there was at some stage there was a sort of review or something that said that Aboriginal artists aren't being competitive, against everybody else. So let's make sure that we've got a program that supports their needs or their cultural practices. And the same with, there was an Arts and Disability Fund, which is now no longer at this point, but hopefully that will come back up. So that there are ways to target different sort of areas. And so there's a range of programs. So it's not just the big programs. There's the residency programs that are available to everyone. And that's not, you can take a residency program that's not even necessarily about an outcome. You can just talk about what you would get as an artist out of having a wilderness residency or a residency at a cultural heritage site. So some programs are not about outcomes, they're about your practice, and some programs are about a project specific, you just want to work on this. The other thing with grants is that if you've got an area that you're not proficient in, you can actually apply for funding and say, look, I'm not great at marketing or whatever it is, and I'd like to employ a professional to work with me. So this fund, even though I would be successful in getting a grant, I'm actually going to use it to pay someone else to help me in the area that I'm not specifically good at, or it might be that I want to work on learning these new skills from a mentorship. I want to work with a designer. So there's a whole range of things you can get funding for.
I'm going to ask.
So can I make a comment then, and I won't ask another question? Please do. My comment is, Katrina, I was pleased with your comment that a grant is a form of exchange. I thought that was very useful, because I get told too often that because I'm on the local council, we're part of the funding for this anyway. But in another context, I'm told, oh no, you're not entitled as a grantee to have any say in the way this goes together, to which my answer is, I don't buy that. I think as a person providing the money, there should be an interaction about how it operates. So I thought that was a useful point.
Okay.
Maybe it's not what you meant.
Maybe not, but we'll see.
Yes, I think we've had a funding, and we can refer back to it in the next two sections, in fact, which we will meld into one. Now, we're going to talk about marketing, and it's been billed as a marketing workshop by Robin. So I think a workshop is anything where people bring their skills and pass it on maybe to the people who are actually attending, and there could be an exchange of the people who are supposed to be learning the skills and pass them right back to the people up here. So I'm going to ask each of the people on this panel. By the way, I just received an apology from Kylie Eastley. She was on her way up, but she was unable to come up and had to return to Hobart, so I'm just making her apologies. Which has allowed each of you to be able to speak longer and have more questions. Marketing. Why is marketing important? And again, from your different perspectives, can you give us a checklist that you can, for example, pass on to people, or maybe put up on the screen to say how you do it? What's important in marketing? What are the dot points of marketing? Can we start with you?
Yes. Well, I'm going to be a bit pedantic and not exactly talk about marketing, but talk about a part of marketing which I come across all the time, and I feel like all can, be helpful to remind ourselves. And I'm really talking about communication. And, it's a bit of a fine line, whether it's marketing or whether it's communication, but communication in the sense of how we communicate who we are as an artist and how we communicate what we want to do or what our project's about or what our artwork is about. And it's only that I come across these two forms of communication all the time that I want to talk about. One is talking about an artist statement, and then the other is talking about an artist bio. And I think both of those documents or words around or types of communication artists use a lot of, whether you're communicating with a gallery that you're presented by, or whether you're communicating for a funding application, or whether you're just talking about your work. Often those two pieces of written work are really important. And I just want to start by reading an example of an artist statement that I came across, and just see what you think. And it starts with the name of the artist, and I'm not actually going to say that, but John Smith. So John Smith calls on us to disconnect with contemporaneity as a commodity tag for the sort of globalised art of efflux advertising that he diagnoses as a mode of rarefied neoliberalism. That's an absolute
Really?
example.
That sounds like a PhD student.
Oh, a very poor one.
No, seriously.
It obviously comes from an academic background.
Yes.
So I just wanted to talk to you about whether you could even get any kind of sense of what that person was talking about in the first instance, and whether you think that's an effective form of communication. I think it's pretty obvious that it's not. But there is a lot of that type of art speak, that that artists talk about their work, and for whatever reason.
I'll tell you why. Because in art schools, theory departments have taken over the art schools and killed any form of constructive, skill-based practice.
Yeah. So I had a few notes on checklists.
There are some things I do agree with.
Yeah.
Well, there are lots.
Well, look, I think, and there's absolutely a place for that, and maybe it is in an academic arena. But I'm just saying,
No, even if you're writing an academic article, you should not write like that. You must.
so here's my checklist of artist statements.
All right.
Okay? So I think writing artist statements can be a good way to clarify your own ideas about your work. I'm not saying they're easy things to write, but I think they are important and they can help you reflect on what it is that you're doing. They are actually really an important document that galleries often want, or curators want, or just as a way of communicating to the general public. The one thing I would also say is don't rely on the gallery to write it for you, because galleries are particularly bad listeners, from my experience. Some of them, not all, some of them. Often, I just say that they are a good way to introduce say in the work, what influences your work, what techniques or style do you use to create your work. So all of those kind of things. Write it in the third person. Don't write it, I do this or I do that. Write it in the third person because it's much easier for someone else to then talk about your work and promote your work if they can kind of copy and paste it. This is the idea of how these things work. So write it clearly and use plain English. So think about what it says as you as an artist and what it's, you know, and how it conveys, you know, what you're trying to say and what you're trying to do. That will be the artist statement. Make sure it's no longer than a page, but also have a full version of them. Yeah, so you might have a paragraph, you might have a longer format. If it's for an exhibition, for example, you might want to talk more about it, you might want to talk less. So that's the artist statement. So it's about your work. And then the other thing is an artist bio. So both of these, the artist statement might be about a particular body of work, and just a body of work. The artist bio is about who you are, and it can change. You should really look at reviewing it all the time. So here's a good example. Well, I think it's a good example of an artist bio. And there's, you know, as many artists, as many bios. Everyone's got versions and versions. But I just thought this is kind of an interesting way. Maybe it gives you an insight into what this artist does, or I don't know, maybe it doesn't. But it's about Brigitte Osland, so I don't know if you know her work.
Should you review
No, well, it's a public one. So yeah, Brigitte's inspiration may perhaps stem from her previous life as a librarian. Language books, the art of reading and communication feature heavily in hypnotic and seductive works Osland produces. Deeply layered works engage with her audience on all levels, the shadows of which linger on in their minds as they await her next chapter. It's not perfect, but it gives you a sense of who she is, where she's come from, a little bit about her work. You can kind of get a mental picture of what might that be about. So it's just a good way. So again, write it in the third person, use plain English, don't use art speak, don't just write a laundry list of accomplishments. Make it a summary of your practice, you know, about 120 to 150 words. So I suppose the other thing that I find interesting, if you're having trouble trying to prepare something like this, talk to someone else about your work. Because sometimes it's easier to speak about it than write it down. So maybe talk to a friend and get them to write down what you say. That's always a good start. And also I've been thinking about this word practice, which we use a lot. And it seems like it's not necessarily a new way to describe what an artist does. But often we used to talk about what they did. So they were a painter or they were a landscape watercolourist or whatever, but now we talk about practice, what their artistic practice is. And that sounds a bit like itself, but it might be just a way for you to think about, well, what do I, when I'm making work, what is it that I practice all the time? Maybe that's a good point to sort of examine and start thinking about how you can describe who you are and what you do. So that was my thought around communicating who you are and what you do.
Also, it's like, that always is a donation to go out onto the island in the donation box. When the money hits the bottom of the box, so I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I wasn't wondering. But thank you, Edwina, for that, because both the presentations have been clear and very easy to understand, extraordinarily useful. And I guess something that you might want to take away from a presentation is, I hope you're clear in your mind what the difference is between a resume or artist biography or an artist statement and a CV. What is the difference between those three things? They're very, very different, and I think I hope you got that clear across to everyone. Not a shopping list, the statement is not a shopping list of your achievements. That can go into your CV. And your CV, try and have different versions. 1 page, 2 page, and the full Monty. So,
I'm curious to know, did you respond to that first applicant that was...
Well, that wasn't an application, they were promoting an event for people to go to. And no, I was just like, I don't even know what this is, so I can't pass it.
It might have been a wonderful event.
It might have been fantastic, and probably extremely interesting and fascinating. But you've got to provide, you've got to assume that people don't know who you are and what you do. So you do need to just communicate in I'm in the arts, but I don't know. Like what? I don't know.
years ago, the word posit was a very important word in theory. So I had a friend who posited everything. She never deposited anything.
Yeah, we
But she posited this, posits that. Posit.
You know what throat is, right?
But,
It's a bonnet smoked up by a baby.
oh, she didn't mean that.
That's what I thought. And then the other thing I was going to say is also, if you haven't seen the Tasmanian Arts Guide, you should have a look. I've left some flyers over there. Arts Tasmania run it, and it's got a section on, you know, events, what's on. It's got a section on where you can go for creative places. It's a cultural tourism run, but there's also a section for artists. So there's about 260 profiles of Tasmanian artists or arts organisations. So if you want some ideas about how people talk about who they are, have a look at that. Some of them are written by the galleries and they're not great, and they're in the first person, and there's a whole lot of things wrong with them. But it is worth just reading through a few, seeing what stands out from that person that you got an instant, you know, and try and kind of, you know, think about how you might craft it. Don't copy it obviously, but just to make it relevant to you. So do some research and have a look on, you know, that's an easy place to go to have a look at how they're writing about themselves. Because it's not easy to write about yourself. I don't even like being a photo taker.
Some
People
people
like
are
writing.
about
You see what I mean? You know, it's not an easy thing to do, and sometimes it is easier if someone else can do it for you. So maybe just have a conversation about practice.
Okay, thank you very much, Karina. Karina?
I'm not going to do any visuals.
No?
No, but it's, the order is not as I would like it, so
I'm so sorry.
I'll be much better to talk. So, who here defines themselves as an artist, or a designer, or a maker? Designers, makers, artists? Any object makers? Object.
I used to be.
Okay. So, I think with marketing, it's very important that you identify why you make or design what it is that you do. Is it for self-interest? Is it for a particular client? Is it for the general public? Different types of stakeholder engagement, because understanding why you make your work is going to help you to understand the type of marketing pathway and profile that you need to create for yourself. So if you make your artwork from a personal position, you still have to think about and understand the type of person who's, if you want to sell it, that is, who's going to sell that, or the type of gallery that you need to approach. So you've really got to start with the end in mind, in a way, in terms of why you're doing this artistic practice and creating these things. When you're all marketing, when you've got your object or the collateral that you're working with, it always starts with the story. I believe that even as a designer working for a client, if you've got a commission and they've commissioned you to do a dining table, you've created this relationship with understanding the client's story, understanding your knowledge and experience of materials, how it all comes together and produces this one particular piece. So there's a narrative involved in the creation of the work, and the way in which you can think about and articulate that will help inform the way you communicate that story within a marketing context. Now, we are incredibly lucky today because we're in a whole new world. We're not reliant on just government funding, and we're not reliant on galleries. There's a whole new system that's opened up through the use of the internet and a whole range of different sites that you can put your work up and sell through. Etsy is probably historically one of the biggest international craft maker sites that you can look for. Even Gumtree and eBay you can sell work through. I mean, it may not be your cup of tea, but it's a form of exchange. There's all these other platforms that you can...
What was the first one?
Etsy, E-T...
Yes,
And actually the University of Tasmania are looking to produce a Tasmanian Etsy for young artists and designers for them to be able to sell their work. So they're actually on creating this new platform, which I think is a great idea. So there's these two different levels in which work currently can be, I suppose, put into the public arena. You've got your gallery system and retail shops, for example. So Design Tasmania has a retail store and all the retail in the city, and then there's pop-up shops that are quite popular now. So a lot of young people again are taking a more self-initiated response to getting their work out into a public area. So knowing what it is that you're producing, understanding who your stakeholders are or the people that you're interested in reaching will determine which profile or which avenue you're better suited to go down. So it's horses for courses kind of thing. But in each instance, you have to know yourself. You need to create a unique story as part of your marketing profile. So extending on from the artist statement and the bio, looking at the actual work that's been created, how can you best communicate that and position that in the context of the world and competitors and other consumers around you. So you've got to think of yourself as a brand. Think of yourself as creating an elevator pitch. You know, if you had 3 minutes to explain to people, or even 2 minutes to explain to people what it is that you do, what would that be? What would it look like? I think that's important. Understanding what your values are is also important within that. How can you think about how those values are embedded into a piece of work or a product? And when you align your values, you don't have to fear selling yourself short. So the work that you're producing is, you feel comfortable about that, and you feel comfortable about passing that on. So there's different avenues and channels, and understanding customers' needs and wants. That's a traditional marketing term, but it still holds up whether you're an artist or not. And I'm not saying that you don't produce, you don't necessarily have to produce work to suit other people, but know that you're also, if you don't, you're potentially limiting yourself to yourself. Unless you can find other people that like what you do. So you need to think about that. And that comes into looking at packaging, pricing, labels. There's a lot of other aspects that go into, I'm talking about homewares and objects from a designer context. I don't know if your dolls have all of that. But I just also want to just tell you a story about, I've got this little business, it's in pet memorials, and the first thing that I created was called the burial bone, and it's this crucifix style little ceramic bone cross for that you put in the garden, and I created prototypes, I mocked up packaging, I had it I wanted to sell through retail pet stores, and I put it into this shop in Balmain in Sydney, and it sat there and it sat there and it sat there, nothing happened. I was so caught up in this bloody product. I then went and ignored what was happening around me and the fact that I wasn't getting much interest. Went ahead and produced 200 units of each. 1,000, because you've got to work in a production unit, so you've got to make multiples of things to get the price down. I think I had, packaging-wise, over 1,000 boxes cut and produced. And now I've got a room or several rooms full of burial bones that will become an art installation at some stage. And that was me from a marketing point of view, not listening, not wanting to hear the fact that actually this was a dud. And it was up there.
I've seen the ad.
I know.
Basically.
Yeah, it was in the junction.
Oh, that's right. Then where can I get one?
You want one?
I want one. Because I'm just so my house. I've got a cat buried there. I want to make sure they don't pick her up.
Well, I've had the success is that my business and other products is selling very well, but the burial bone just hasn't moved the way. I've sold more to Broome, people in Broome away, and so the cost of getting it over there, I mean, I haven't made any money on that product. So there's this.
When you do your installation,
I will do
the
that.
RSPCA.
That's right. But sometimes you miss the mark. Or what I like to say is, as a designer, I'm a visionary person. And
The market doesn't put up to
that's
you.
right, that's exactly right, and that's true. As artists and designers, we are ahead of the market, and it's my life. I've always been 5 to 6 years ahead of the market. So the burial bone, Greg,
Be ready. Well, actually, you're ready when the market
you just
arrives.
have a think about it now. How many people now talk about death and grieving and loss? It's much more open a conversation that people are able to have now than they were 5 years ago.
And in Burnley, even the council passed approval for a site of natural burying, so no real coffins, cardboard boxes and
Yeah.
shrouds.
Yes,
That's amazing.
yes. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
How did you put it on Etsy? Or go through?
No,
No, it's a
Well,
dud.
there would be, you don't have people who spend money now creating, or promoting their.
Yes, I know. But I have done the statistics on it. It's millions of dollars waiting for me. I just haven't got the right marketing yet.
All right, next point.
So my next point is that sometimes you have to let things go and start on a new idea. You know, like this, there's more fish to fry to see. And I'm happy to talk and critique and work with people on an individual level with their artwork and how to market something. We don't really have time